The Vorth Collective had been mapping the outer fringe for 11 cycles when their deep resonance scanner picked up something that made every crew member on the Ashkaval stop breathing. Not metaphorically. The Vorth literally stopped breathing when they were confused. Their respiratory system was voluntary, a biological quirk that their philosophers had spent centuries arguing was either a gift or a curse. When the mind went still, the body followed. 3 seconds of total silence on the bridge, 12 bodies frozen mid-motion, and then cartographer Sen exhaled first, which meant she was the one who had to speak. "That frequency," she said, her four-fingered hand hovering over the display without touching it, as if contact might erase what she was seeing. "That is a closed frequency." Navigator Drull rotated his upper torso to face her without moving his legs. The Vorth had a spine that worked in 2 independent sections, upper and lower, and Drull had a habit of splitting his attention literally, his legs still aimed at the helm while his eyes found Sen. "Closed since the Vorth founding accord. 340 cycles ago." "I know when it was closed," Sen said quietly. The frequency in question, Resonance Band Call 7, had been sealed by the founding accord not because it was dangerous but because it was sacred. Every spacefaring civilization in the Galactic Cooperative had agreed, without exception, to leave Call 7 untouched. It was the band reserved for one purpose and one purpose only: first contact with a new species. The rules were ancient and serious. If a civilization had never been contacted, if they were still in their developmental stage, you did not ping them, you did not scan them, you did not even look in their direction using active instruments. You left Call 7 open so that if they ever reached out, the signal would travel clean and uncluttered across the galaxy. The signal coming through Call 7 right now was not from any known species. It was not a greeting. It was not a distress call. It was music. Sen pressed her hearing membranes flat against her skull, the Vorth equivalent of leaning in close, and listened. The signal was structured in a way that was deeply, almost uncomfortably complex. It wasn't the simple mathematical primes that first contact theorists always predicted a developing civilization would broadcast. It wasn't a looping beacon or a recorded language sample. It was a song, with harmonics layered inside harmonics, rhythmic structures that shifted just when your mind thought it had found the pattern, melodies that rose and fell with something that felt, and Sen knew this was unscientific. She knew it, felt like longing. "Source coordinates," said Captain Orith, who had not moved from his chair but whose lower body had gone completely rigid. Among the Vorth, that was the physical sign of authority asserting itself over fear. Drull, read them out. The bridge went silent again. "That's the veiled system," said Science Officer Pravn, her voice dropping to almost nothing. "The one the cooperative charted as biologically complex, but pre-technological." "Pre-technological was the last survey," Sen said. "That survey was 400 cycles ago," Orith said. He didn't say anything else for a long moment. He didn't need to. Every person on that bridge understood what 400 cycles of unobserved development meant. It meant that whatever was on that planet had been growing, changing, building, completely unwatched, completely unknown for longer than the Vorth Collective had existed in its current form. Longer than most of the current cooperative member civilizations had been spacefaring. 400 cycles. Sen pulled up the old survey data with shaking hands. The planet had been a blue-green sphere with vast liquid water oceans, a thick nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, and what the surveyors had described as promising but unremarkable biological complexity. Mostly small mammals. Some larger creatures. Nothing that suggested civilization was coming anytime soon. The surveyors had been wrong. "Do we respond?" Pravn asked. Captain Orith stood up slowly. His lower spine rotated until both halves of his body faced the same direction, something the Vorth only did in moments of complete, total commitment. It was a physical statement. No divided attention. No split focus. "We respond," he said. "But first, I want to know exactly what that song is saying." Sen was already working on it. She would spend the next 6 hours listening to that signal on repeat, running it through every linguistic and cultural analysis model the Ashkaval carried. She would eat her evening ration with one hearing membrane still pressed to the speaker. She would fall into a half-sleep at her station and wake up suddenly at the third hour with the strange and certain feeling that the song wasn't broadcasting outward at all. It wasn't meant for the galaxy. It had just escaped. And that distinction, small as it seemed, would turn out to be the most important thing she had ever noticed. The Ashcavel sent its report to the Galactic Cooperative Central Archives before it did anything else. Protocol demanded it. Discovery of a call, 7's signal required immediate notification of all 37 member civilizations, a convening of the First Contact Ethics Committee, and a mandatory 48-hour pause before any responding transmission could be sent. What the cooperative did not expect was the reaction. Within 6 hours of the report going out, the secure channel was flooded. Not with congratulations. Not with procedural questions. With silence requests. 17 civilizations, nearly half the cooperative, sent formal communications asking the Ashcavel to hold all further transmissions, seal the discovery report to senior council members only, and await instruction. The language varied, but the message was identical. Do not proceed without full cooperative consensus. This situation requires extreme care. Sen read through the communications while the ship sat motionless in space, engines cooled to minimum, as if the Ashcavel itself were holding its breath again. Extreme care, she repeated to Pravn. 17 civilizations used those exact words. Extreme care. Pravn was a biologist by training, and she had a biologist's habit of noting when patterns appeared in data that shouldn't be patterned. That phrasing is too consistent to be coincidence, she said. Someone sent a template. Someone who already knew what we were going to find. That thought sat between them like a stone in still water. Captain Orith called a senior staff meeting and laid the facts plainly. The cooperative was stalling. The question was whether they were stalling out of genuine ethical caution. First contact was, after all, an irreversible act, or whether something else was happening. Something older. It was the Ashcavel's historian, an elderly Vorith named Kylm who rarely left his cabin and communicated mostly through written notes, who provided the missing piece. He appeared at the meeting in person, which was unusual enough that everyone fell quiet immediately. There is a document, Kylm said, settling into his chair with a careful deliberateness of someone whose joints had been working for 80 cycles, that most cooperative citizens have never read. Not because it is classified, because it is boring. It is filed under Procedural Annex 7 of the original Founding Accord, subsection 44, and it concerns the veiled systems specifically. He placed a data chip on the table. 400 cycles ago, when the original survey was conducted, the biologists did not just find small mammals, Kylm said. They found one species that was already showing early signs of social organization, tool use, and most significantly, the beginning of what the surveyors called reflective consciousness. The ability to think about thinking, to build symbolic systems, language, ritual, meaning-making. He let that settle. The debate that followed lasted 11 cycles. The question was whether to intervene, to guide the development of the species, to accelerate their growth, to bring them into the cooperative as a protectorate. Several civilizations argued strongly for it. The Thalvine, particularly, pushed hard. He paused. The Thalvine always push hard. What was the decision? Orith asked. Non-interference. Unanimous, eventually. The argument that one was philosophical, not practical, that a species whose development was shaped by outside contact could never be fully itself. That anything they built would carry the fingerprints of the civilization that guided them, not their own. That to help them was to, in a fundamental sense, replace them with a version of themselves that we preferred. Sen thought about the song, about how it felt like something that had escaped, not been sent. So they were left alone, she said. Completely alone, Kylm confirmed. And then, over the following cycles, the record of that decision was buried, not deleted, but buried, in procedural annexes, where no one would think to look. Because the cooperative was embarrassed. Because leaving them alone had felt right philosophically and deeply uncomfortable emotionally. Watching something grow and choosing not to help requires a kind of discipline that most civilizations prefer not to examine too closely. And now they're transmitting on call 7, Pravin said. Now they're transmitting on call 7, Kylm agreed. Which means they found the frequency. which means they understand, on some level, that they are not alone. And they decided to. He paused, searching for the word sing. The meeting ended without a decision because Orith recognized that the decision they were being asked to make was not really about protocol. It was about whether 400 cycles of discipline was about to be undone by a song. Sen went back to her station. She had finished her linguistic analysis. She knew now what the song was about. It was about a question. The same question, repeated in dozens of variations across the 17-minute transmission, woven into the harmonic structure like a thread through fabric. The question was not, "Are you there?" It was not, "We come in peace." The question, as best as Sen could translate the emotional mathematics of it, was this: did we do this right? A whole civilization, singing into the dark, asking no one in particular. Asking everything, whether the life they had built, the world they had made, the choices they had stumbled through across thousands of years of their own unguided history, whether any of it had been worth something. Sen sat with that for a long time. Then she started writing a response, not an official one, not a cooperative-approved transmission. Just words. Just her own attempt to answer, even if it never got sent. She wrote, "You have no idea what you built." The cooperative's 48-hour pause meant nothing to the Thalvine. They had been watching the Ashkavel's position since the discovery report went out, and they had a ship closer to the veiled system than anyone else, not by accident, Sen suspected, but by a readiness that suggested they had been waiting for exactly this moment. The Thalvine Endurance vessel Sorvin dropped out of fold space 30,000 kilometers from the Ashkavel on the morning of the second day, and its captain, a Thalvine named Gaval, opened a channel immediately. The Thalvine were large. That was the first thing non-Thalvine always noticed, and then felt guilty about noticing, as if size were an observation that implied judgment. They were tall and broad, with a dense layered musculature that had evolved on a high-gravity world, and their faces were flat and wide with eyes set far apart, a predator's field of vision, though the Thalvine had not been predators for millions of years. They moved with a physical confidence that smaller species sometimes misread as aggression. It wasn't aggression. It was simply the ease of a body that had never needed to be afraid. Gaval appeared on the Ashkavel's view screen and did not bother with formal greeting. "You're still sitting here," he said. "We're following protocol," Orith replied. "The cooperative is arguing," Gaval said. "They will argue for weeks. They argued for 11 cycles 400 cycles ago, and they will do it again now." His wide eyes held a steadiness that Sen found hard to read. Not cold, exactly, but decided. The look of someone who had already done the difficult thinking and was now simply waiting for the world to catch up. "I'm going to the planet. That violates." "I know what it violates," Gaval said. "I have read Procedural Annex 7, subsection 44. I have also read the original survey biologists' personal journals, which are not in the cooperative archive. One of them wrote, on the last day of the survey, before they turned their ship around and left, 'I keep thinking about whether we will ever know how they turn out, whether anyone will be there to see it.'" He paused. Someone should be there to see it. The channel closed. Orith turned to his senior staff. "Options. We could transmit to the cooperative," Drull said. "We could follow them," Pravin said. "We could go first," Sen said. Everyone looked at her. "If the Thalvine make first contact alone," she said carefully, "the civilization on that planet meets one species. One face for all the cooperative. The Thalvine are," she paused, choosing words with precision, "decided people. They will make contact in their way. The people on that planet deserve to meet something more complicated than certainty." Orith was quiet for a moment. "You're not arguing for protocol." "I'm arguing for honesty," Sen said. "Which is different." They followed the Sorvin. As the veiled system grew larger in the Ashkavel's forward screens, the planet resolved from a dim blue-green point into something that made Sen's chest feel strange. It was a feeling she didn't have a word for in Vorith. She would later learn the planet's dominant species had several words for it, which struck her as characteristic. The planet was beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they have been growing without interference for a very long time. Not perfect, not symmetrical, not optimized, but alive in every direction at once. There were lights on the night side. That was the moment it became real to her. Not the signal, not the song, not the report or the debate. The lights on the dark half of the planet, thousands of them, millions of them, scattered across the surface in clusters and lines and webs, each one a fire that something had decided to make. They built cities, Pravin said softly. They built a civilization, Kjolm corrected, from the doorway of the bridge where he had stationed himself without anyone noticing. There is a difference. The Sorvin was already descending toward the upper atmosphere, and the planet's surface, Sen noticed, had gone quiet on call 7. The song had stopped. They knew something was coming. Let it be recorded, as Sen would later write in her personal archive, which would eventually become the most read document in cooperative history, that the first clear image of Earth's surface transmitted back to the Ashkavel was not a military installation, not a capitol building, not a research facility. It was a harbor, a small city wrapped around a curved bay, white buildings stepping up a green hillside, fishing boats rocking on blue water in the early morning light. The image came from the Sorvin's passive visual array, which could read color and texture and light with extraordinary precision, and the detail was enough that you could see, if you looked closely, a single figure standing on a dock. Just standing. Looking up. Sen stared at that image for a long time. The figure was small, smaller than a Vorith, much smaller than a Thalvine, and bipedal, with 2 arms and a rounded head, and a posture that expressed something even across the enormous difference in their biologies. Something upright. Something waiting. As if they had known to go stand on that dock this morning. As if someone had been waiting on docks and hilltops and rooftops and open fields all over this planet since the moment the song went out, just in case. It turned out that was almost exactly right. The signal on call 7 had been broadcasting for 19 of Earth's own solar cycles, 19 years, from an installation built by a coalition of the planet's nation-states specifically for that purpose. The project had no unified name. Different governments called it different things. But the people who worked on it, the scientists, the engineers, the linguists, the musicians who had composed the transmission, had called it, informally, the Patience Project. Because that was what it required. Not brilliance. Not technology. Patience. They had built the transmitter knowing they might never receive a response. They had designed the signal knowing they might be sending it into a permanently empty sky. They had programmed it to broadcast for 100 of their years regardless of response, because they believed, the lead designer's words, found later in her published journal, that a message worth sending is worth sending completely, even if no one receives it. The Thalvine Sorvin entered low orbit and established a visual observation position. No descent yet. Gaval was not reckless. He was decided, which was different. He would look before he moved. What he saw made him open the channel to the Ashkavel again. Cartographer, he said, addressing Sen directly, which was unusual. You study signal structures. Tell me what I'm looking at. He shared his sensor feed. Sen looked at what the Sorvin's instruments were reading from Earth's surface and felt the breath go out of her voluntarily. The planet's electromagnetic output was, there was no diplomatic way to put this, overwhelming. Not in terms of power, but in terms of complexity. Every city was a web of simultaneous signals, thousands of separate frequencies in use at once, layered over each other in what should have been total chaos, but somehow wasn't. The species had developed, apparently through no small amount of trial and catastrophic failure, a system for managing simultaneous communication across an entire planet that the Ashkavel's instruments could technically read but not fully process. How many separate active communications channels are currently operating on this planet? Sen asked her computer. The computer took longer than usual to answer. Estimated 4.7 billion simultaneous active channels, it said. Sen read the number 3 times. 4.7 billion. The planet's population, per the Sorvin's quick count, was approximately 8 billion individuals, which meant that at this particular moment on an otherwise ordinary morning, more than half the planet was talking to someone. They never stopped communicating, Sen said, half to herself. Pravn, looking over her shoulder at the feed, said very quietly, "They're afraid of silence." It wasn't an insult. It was an observation. And later, much later, when Sen was able to ask about it, a human researcher would tell her that yes, that was essentially correct, and the species had spent a great deal of time arguing about whether that fear was a weakness or a strength, and the most honest answer anyone had ever come up with was both, depending on the day. Gaval's voice came back through the channel. "I'm going down," he said. And this time no one argued. The official First Contact Protocol, as written by the Cooperative's First Contact Ethics Committee over many cycles of careful deliberation, was a 47-step process. It involved preliminary observation periods, linguistic analysis phases, controlled signal exchanges, and a graduated approach designed to minimize shock, misrepresentation, and the various disasters that the Cooperative's historical record showed could result from a poorly managed introduction between civilizations. The Sorvin landed in a field. Not because Gaval was careless. Because the field was the only flat open space within range that didn't have buildings on it, and the Sorvin was a large ship, and Thalvine practical problem-solving tended to override procedural preference in moments of logistical pressure. The field was in a region the planet's dominant mapping system, Sen's computer identified it in seconds, called simply the countryside. Green. Quiet. A row of low hills to the east, a dirt road running along the western edge, and, standing on that dirt road within minutes of the Sorvin's landing, a single human in work clothes and rubber boots who had apparently been tending to an agricultural operation nearby and had simply walked over to see what had landed. Gaval watched this person on his external cameras for several minutes. The person stood at the edge of the field, hands in their coat pockets, looking at the ship with an expression that Gaval's translation software would later describe as calm curiosity, which he found remarkable. The Thalvine had done extensive historical modeling of how developing civilizations typically reacted to sudden manifestations of unknown technology in their agricultural land. Calm curiosity had not scored highly in any of the projections. He opened the external speaker. "We have come," he stopped. The translation software was still calibrating. He tried a different approach. He played a short segment of the original call, 7 transmission back, through the external speaker. The person in the field tilted their head. Then they pulled a small rectangular device from their coat pocket, a personal communication tool, Sen's instruments confirmed, and appeared to record the playback. Then they said something. The translation software caught it, processed it, and returned a result that Gaval read twice because he was certain it must be wrong. The person had said, "Oh, so someone did get it. Not what are you? Not this cannot be real. Not fear, not awe, not the existential destabilization that the First Contact Ethics Committee had spent so many cycles preparing protocols for. Oh, so someone did get it." As if the real anxiety, the one that had lived in this species for 19 years since the signal went out, had not been will aliens exist, but will the message reach them? As if existence had already been settled. As if the only open question was the postal one. Gaval opened the landing ramp. He stepped out into an earth morning, cool air, damp grass, the smell of something growing that his olfactory sensors translated as agricultural soil in productive condition, and also, faintly, something that the sensors labeled unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. The sky above him was a pale blue that his Thalvine eyes registered differently than the humans would, picking up frequencies toward the ultraviolet that made the upper atmosphere appear faintly violet at the edges. He walked to the edge of the field. The human looked up at him. Gaval was very large, by any standard, and the expression on their face moved through several things rapidly. Recognition that this was real, some processing of the physical scale of the visitor, and then, settling, something that Gaval would describe in his report as the decision to be decent about it. The human stuck out one hand. Gaval looked at it. His translation software flagged the gesture as greeting ritual, physical contact, right hand, culturally significant across multiple human societies. He had 4 fingers instead of 5. He extended his hand anyway. They shook hands in a field. The human said their name. Gaval said his. The human said, "There are people coming. A lot of people. I should probably call someone official before it gets." They gestured at the road, where, indeed, vehicles were already appearing in the distance. Complicated. "That would be useful," Gaval agreed. "Can I ask?" The human paused, not nervously but carefully, the way someone pauses when they are about to ask the question they have been saving. "Was there more than one of you? Out there, I mean." That hurt it. Gaval looked back at the Sorvin. He thought about the Ashkaval in orbit above them. He thought about the 17 civilizations who had sent silence requests. He thought about 400 cycles of the cooperative watching a blue-green planet and making the disciplined choice not to interfere. "There is more than one of us," he said. The human nodded slowly, absorbing this. Then they said very quietly, in what Gaval's software identified as a half-exhale, a sound that was equal parts relief and weight, of SYMJHY. No, that wasn't right. That wasn't their language. What they said was the English equivalent, the human version of that feeling. What they said was, "Now what do we do with that?" And Gaval, who was decided about most things, found that for the first time in a very long time, he had no answer ready. News traveled at fold-space speed across the cooperative, and even so, the reaction arrived faster than the Ashkaval's crew expected. Within 48 hours of the Sorvin's landing, every major cooperative communication network was running the story. Not because the cooperative's formal communications office had released it, they were still drafting the official statement, but because Sen had done something she would later describe, with complete honesty, as a mistake that turned out to be correct. She had transmitted the raw sensor data from first contact, the field, the handshake, the moment, the question, to the cooperative archive without encryption flags. Open access. Anyone with a receiver could read it. She hadn't done it to cause chaos. She had done it because she was a cartographer and cartographers recorded things, and this was the most important thing she had ever been present for, and she had an instinct born from long practice that the most dangerous thing you could do with an important thing was decide who was and wasn't allowed to see it. The response from the cooperative was, in the polite diplomatic language of intercivilization communication, somewhere between alarm and fury. The response from individual citizens of cooperative civilizations was something else entirely. The images spread. Specifically, one image spread more than any other. Not the landing. Not the handshake. An image from the Sorvin's external camera, taken in the moment after the handshake. The human standing in the field looking up at Gaval, and Gaval looking back down, and neither of them speaking, just two creatures from two different evolutionary histories standing in damp grass on a cool morning, occupying the same piece of ground without drama. The caption that spread with it, written by a young Vorith communications technician on the Ashkaval who had been monitoring civilian networks and had the exact right instincts for the moment, was a single line. They built a whole civilization, and then they asked if they'd done it right. That line undid something in the cooperative that centuries of philosophy had not been able to touch. Because every civilization in the cooperative, the Vorith, the Thalvine, the quiet aquatic Sivan, the gas-dwelling Kalpari, all 37 members, had a version of that question in their own history. Every civilization had a moment in their archive, usually buried, usually embarrassing, where they had looked at what they were building and asked something functionally identical to "Did we do this right?" They had all decided, at various points, that the question was too vulnerable to keep asking. That civilization required confidence. That you built forward, not inward. Here was a species that had put the question in the signal. Had made the vulnerability the message. Had decided, apparently after long internal debate, that if they were going to announce themselves to the universe, they were going to do it honestly. Not with power demonstrations. Not with mathematical proofs of their intelligence. Not with formal greetings designed to project capability. With a song that said, "We are not sure we got this right, but we tried and we kept going and here we are." The cooperative went quiet. Not with the bureaucratic silence of stalled committees. With the specific silence of 37 civilizations simultaneously reconsidering something. Captain Orith found Sen at her station in the middle of the ship's rest cycle, the lights low, the Ashkaval holding a slow orbit above the planet while below them the lights on the night side burned in their millions. "You transmitted the data," he said. "Yes." "Without authorization." "Yes." He stood there for a moment. "The ethics committee is requiring a formal explanation." "I know. What will you tell them?" Sen thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "I'll tell them that a species that put their deepest question in a public signal deserved to have their answer delivered the same way." Orith was quiet. Then he said, "The Suvan are sending a ship. The Kelpari are sending two. The committee voted, while you were sitting here not sleeping, to formally upgrade the veiled system to full contact status." A pause. 37 civilizations want to meet them. Sen looked out at the planet. Karo, she said, or the Vorath equivalent, a word that meant then let us begin, used at the start of things that cannot be undone. The next 30 days, by Earth's calendar, were the most documented period in cooperative history and also, paradoxically, the most difficult to describe. Because the documentation captured facts, and the facts were interesting, but what was actually happening was something that facts were not particularly good at holding. What was happening was 37 civilizations were meeting humans, and humans were being humans about it. Sen kept a journal. Some entries. Day 4. A delegation from the nearest major human political authority came aboard the Ashkaval for a formal meeting. There were 11 of them. They were formally dressed, which apparently among humans signals seriousness and respect. They shook hands with everyone, which we had been briefed was a greeting, and then they sat down and the lead delegate said, before any formal agenda item, "Before we start, are any of you hungry? We brought food. We weren't sure if you could eat our food, but we thought it was rude not to offer." I don't know why this affected me the way it did. We couldn't eat their food. The biochemistry is incompatible in several directions. But they had brought it. They had thought, what if they're hungry? What if we have something they need? What can we offer? They left the food on the table. We looked at it throughout the meeting. After the delegation left, Pravin spent 4 hours analyzing it with great scientific interest and said it was extraordinarily complex in its preparation for something edible. I don't know if that was a compliment. I think it was. Day 9. I asked one of the human linguistics researchers, a woman named Dr. Chen who had been part of the original signal design team, about the choice to use music rather than mathematical structures in the Call 7 transmission. She said, there were arguments for math. There always are. Math is universal. Math transcends language. Math is provably logical. And all of that is true. But math tells you what we can do. We wanted to tell you what we feel. Because if you only knew what we could do, you might help us or fear us or respect us, but you wouldn't know us. And we decided, after a long argument, that being known was more important than being impressive. I thought about that for a long time. Being known was more important than being impressive. I went back through the cooperative's own first contact transmissions, the signals we had sent out in our own early spacefaring era, and they were all mathematical. All capability. Here is what we can do. Here is how intelligent we are. Here is our proof of worthiness. Not one of them asked, here is what we wonder about. Here is what we're afraid of. Here is our question. I am not saying humanity is wiser than the cooperative. I don't think that framing is right. I think humanity arrived at a different answer to a question that every civilization faces, and I think the answer surprised us because we had forgotten we had ever faced the question. Day 14. A Thalvine cultural researcher named Borvit, traveling with Gaval's crew, came to me with a discovery that she was too discomfited to deliver formally. She had been studying human history, specifically human conflict history, which is extensive. Humanity has, over its developmental period, engaged in armed conflict at a scale and frequency that is, by cooperative standards, startling. They have also developed and deployed weapons capable of significant civilizational damage. They have, at various points in their recent history, come quite close to self-destruction. Borvit's discomfort was this. She couldn't reconcile it. The species that sent the song with the species in the history files. The delegation that brought food in case we were hungry with the civilization that had, within living memory, nearly destroyed itself. I thought about it for a day. Then I went back to Dr. Chun and asked, as gently as I could, about the history. She didn't flinch. She said, we know what we did, and what we almost did. That's actually, she paused, that's actually part of why the signal went out. Because we'd survived ourselves. Barely. More than once. And we wanted to know if anyone else had done the same. If it was possible to come through that, and still, she searched for the word, still be worth something. The question again. From a different angle. Did we do this right? But underneath it now, did we survive ourselves, and did that survival mean anything? I told Borvit. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, the Thalvine nearly destroyed themselves too. It was 400 cycles ago. We don't speak of it in formal contexts. Most of us don't speak of it, I said.
We sat with that for a while.
The First Contact Ethics Committee convened in full session, all 37 civilizations, for the first time in 200 cycles, not in the cooperative's usual meeting structure, which was conducted through relay transmission, but in physical presence. Or as close to it as biology permitted. 7 civilizations whose physiology was incompatible with standard atmospheric conditions attended via sealed habitat units or remote presence systems. But they came.
They made the journey.
This had not happened before. The official agenda was the formal integration process for Earth, the cooperative's procedures for welcoming a new member civilization, which involved trade framework negotiations, mutual defense considerations, information exchange protocols, and a dozen other items that would take years to work through. But the unofficial reason everyone came, the reason that had not been stated in any formal communication but which Sen understood from the shape of the attendance, was something else. They wanted to see 37 civilizations, each with their own history, their own near misses, their own buried questions and archived embarrassments. They wanted to see the species that had sent the vulnerability out into space and been answered. Not because it was procedurally required, because it mattered to them personally in ways that their formal diplomatic roles didn't fully account for. The first day of the session, before any agenda items were addressed, the committee chair, a Vorath elder named Sareth, who had been in diplomatic service for 60 cycles and was known for precision and brevity, did something unprecedented. She asked for an open session, not a formal address, not a procedural vote. An open session where any representative who wished to speak could speak on any topic related to the contact for as long as was needed. It lasted 9 hours. Representative after representative, some speaking for a few minutes, some for much longer, said versions of the same thing. The Suvan representative, whose species communicated primarily through bioluminescent patterns, but who had developed a spoken language translator for cooperative sessions, produced a light pattern that translated as, "We have a signal in our oldest archives that our historians classified as a communications error. After reading the human transmission analysis, we believe it was our ancestors attempting to do the same thing, ask the same question, and deciding at the last moment not to send it." The Kelpari sent 2 representatives, one from their northern atmospheric band, one from the south, who had not shared a diplomatic table in 40 cycles due to an ongoing territorial dispute, and who had apparently agreed to attend jointly specifically because of what had happened. They didn't explain this publicly. They didn't need to. The Thalvine representative, not Gaval, who was still on Earth, but a senior council member named Thovar, said simply, "We came close to recommending that Earth be classified as a controlled system. That contact be delayed until their civilizational stability metrics reached our standard thresholds. I want to state formally that this recommendation was wrong, and that the humans' metrics were the wrong measure." Someone asked what the right measure was. Thovar was quiet for a long moment. Then, whether they were still asking the question, still genuinely uncertain about whether they had gotten it right. A civilization that has stopped asking is a civilization that has stopped growing. Earth was still asking. That is not a weakness. That is, he searched, that is the thing we should have been measuring all along. Sen, attending as an observer rather than a representative, sat very still in the gallery and felt something shift in her chest, not painfully but significantly, like a joint that had been set wrong for a long time and had just, quietly, corrected itself. After the session, she found Kyon, who had also attended as an observer, standing in the corridor with the specific expression of someone who has seen what they expected to see and finds that expectation being confirmed is, somehow, both satisfying and sad. "You knew this would happen," she said. "I suspected," he said.
History has a pattern.
Every civilization that has been in the cooperative long enough develops what I think of as the hardening. They stop showing the soft parts. They file the vulnerable things in procedural annexes, where no one looks. And then something comes along and shows them the soft part, and it turns out everyone has been waiting for permission to show theirs. He paused. Humanity didn't give them permission, exactly. They just demonstrated that it was survivable. "Is it survivable?"
Sen asked.
"We're about to find out," Kyuln said. On the 22nd day, Dr. Chin came aboard the Ashkaval. It was not an official visit. She had been part of the Earth coordination team attached to the Sorvin, and she had, apparently, simply ask Gaval if she could visit the other ship, and Gaval had said yes, and no one had processed this through any formal channel, and so she arrived in the Ashkaval's secondary docking bay on a small transit vessel with 2 colleagues and a bag that, Sen noticed, contained what appeared to be a significant amount of prepared food. "I know you can't eat it," Dr. Chen said, when she saw Sen noticing the bag. "But I can't visit someone's home without bringing something, so I brought things I could explain to you. These," she held up a small item, "are called dumplings. Someone spent about 300 years figuring out the exact fold that keeps them from falling apart in the pot. And this," she held up a jar, "is preserved fruit. My grandmother made it. She died 8 years ago, and I've been carrying this jar for," she stopped. "I don't know why I'm telling you that." "Because you wanted to," Sen said. Dr. Chen looked at her. "Yes." She set the bag down. "I suppose I did." Sen took her on a tour of the Ashkaval. Not the official tour, the working ship, the cartography bay, the archive room where Kyom kept his physical records because he didn't fully trust digital storage, the observation deck, where the view of Earth currently took up most of the forward window. Dr. Chen stood at the observation window for a long time. "We can't see it this clearly from the ground," she said. "You can see everything from up here. The weather systems. The lights." A pause. "It looks whole." "It is whole," Sen said. "It doesn't feel whole from inside it," Dr. Chen said, not sadly, just honestly. "From inside it, it feels like a collection of arguments, and emergencies, and things that need fixing, and beautiful things, all at the same time. It's hard to see the shape of it when you're inside the shape."
Sen thought about that.
"Most things are." Dr. Chen turned from the window. She had a way of looking at you directly that Sen had noticed in several humans, a quality of attention that didn't deflect or qualify, that simply landed. "Can I ask you something?" "Genuinely ask, not diplomatically." "Yes." "The signal. Call 7. We built that transmitter because we believed there was someone out there who might hear it." Not hoped, believed. It was a conviction, not a probability estimate. Most of the scientists on the project were not people of faith in any traditional sense, but they believed. "And my question," she paused, "my question is, was that belief crazy? Are there civilizations in the cooperative who didn't believe? Who didn't assume the galaxy was occupied?" Sen thought about it carefully. "There are civilizations who believed and civilizations who didn't. The ones who didn't believe are generally the ones who've been most destabilized by contact. Not because they were wrong, but because they had built their self-conception around a certain kind of solitude. Around being the answer to something, rather than part of a conversation." "And you? What did you believe?" Sen looked at the planet in the window. "I believed the galaxy was occupied. I just didn't know by what." A pause. I assumed that whatever was out there, that had made it to the communication stage without destroying itself, would be more settled than you are. More certain. I thought development led towards certainty. And instead, Sen said, it led toward better questions." Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, a short, genuine sound, and said, "SYMJHY. No, that's not what she said. Those weren't her words. But the feeling was that, the feeling of a door that has been propped shut for a long time finally swinging open on its own. And what she actually said was, 'I think I want to show you something.'" She pulled out her personal device. She opened a file. She showed Sen the original design documents for the Call 7 transmitter, not the technical specs, but the philosophical framing document that the project lead had written before the first component was ordered. The document that explained not how they would build it, but why. The reason, the document said, was not scientific. The reason was this: because we survived ourselves. And we wanted to tell someone. The formal integration proceedings continued. Trade frameworks were drafted. Information exchange protocols were negotiated. There were complications, there are always complications, involving several civilizations' legal frameworks for recognizing non-cooperative entities as full persons, a philosophical debate about Earth's current civilizational stage that the Thalveen and the Suvin nearly came to a formal dispute over, and a genuinely complex week involving the Kelpari territorial representatives, who had been cooperating admirably in the joint delegation but had reached the limits of their détente on day. 31, and needed to be separated into different session rooms with significant diplomatic management. These things were recorded and processed and worked through. But Sen was not a diplomat, and the part of the 30 days she kept returning to in her journals, in her later writings, in the conversations she would have for the rest of her life, was not the formal proceedings. It was the human researchers who had come to the Ashkaval and the Sorvin during those weeks. Not the official delegates. The scientists, the engineers, the linguists and musicians and historians who had been part of the Patience Project. The people who had actually built the thing and sent the signal and then waited 19 years. She had asked one of them, a quiet engineer named Marcus, who had designed the transmitter's power systems and had been 18 years old when the project began and was now 37, what it had felt like to wait.
He had thought about it for a long time.
The first years were fine, he said. Hopeful. You sent the thing, you believed it had gone, you trusted the physics. Then around year 7 or 8 you start to not doubt the physics, but doubt yourself. You start to think, what if the signal is perfect and the message is wrong? What if we sent the wrong thing? What if there are 1,000 civilizations out there and this particular message just doesn't land? And then around year 12 you stop thinking about it in those terms and you just keep working on the backup systems. Because that's the only thing you can control. You can't control whether anyone receives it. You can control whether the transmitter keeps running. Was that difficult?
Sen asked.
Focusing only on what you could control? Marcus thought about it. No, he said, which surprised her. It was a relief. The anxiety was in the gap between what I wanted a response and what I could do, keep the transmitter working. Once I accepted that the gap existed and I lived on one side of it, the anxiety went away. I just had a job. A pause. A very specific, very small job that was part of something enormous. That's, he smiled, which was a human facial expression that Sen had come to read quite clearly. That's actually a pretty comfortable place to be. Sen wrote that down. She thought about the 400 cycles the cooperative had spent watching Earth without intervening. The long, disciplined keeping of a particular gap between what they could do and what they chose not to do. She had always thought of that as restraint, as the cooperative's better nature winning over its impulse to reach out, to help, to shape. But Marcus's framework reframed it. They had a job. A very specific, very small job. Don't interfere. Keep the frequency open.
Wait.
The cooperative had been waiting too. On opposite sides of the same gap. Both of them, the planet and the people watching it, occupying the side of the gap that was theirs to occupy, doing the small specific job that was theirs to do, and trusting that the other side of the gap was being tended to by something they couldn't see.
Sen didn't cry.
Vorith didn't cry. But she stopped breathing for a moment, voluntarily, for reasons she understood entirely, because some realizations need a pause around them to be properly held. Then she exhaled. And kept working. The official record of Earth's first contact with the Galactic Cooperative would run to 14,000 pages of formal documentation. It would include trade agreements, biological compatibility studies, defense consultation frameworks, and a landmark philosophical legal document that restructured the cooperative's entire approach to pre-contact observation, replacing the system of passive, unmonitored waiting with an active record-keeping mandate requiring regular archival updates on all known developing civilizations, supervised by a newly created office that was notably staffed with historians, artists, and linguists. Rather than diplomats. Kilm was offered the directorship of this new office. He accepted, on the condition that the office be called the Patience Archive. The committee agreed without debate, which he took as a sign that the name was right. The formal documentation would be read by scholars and diplomats and students across the cooperative for centuries. But the thing that the galaxy would actually remember, the thing that spread not through formal channels, but through the informal human speed transmission of stories that individuals told each other, was smaller. It was the image, the field, the handshake, the two figures in the morning light. And the caption. They built a whole civilization, and then they asked if they'd done it right. And then the follow-up, which Sen herself had added when she released the data, a line that she had included almost unconsciously as a cartographer's note, before she realized what she was writing. The answer, as best we can determine, is not perfectly, but honestly. And they kept going anyway. And that might be the same thing. That second line spread differently than the first. The first line spread with the shock of recognition, the galaxy seeing itself. The second line spread more slowly into places that weren't looking for it and sat there differently. Not as a revelation, but as a permission. The Suvan Cultural Ministry, in a formal statement 18 months after first contact, announced that the archived transmission their historians had re-examined, the one that had been classified as a communications error, the one that might have been their ancestors' attempt at the same question, would be publicly released in full. We had been protecting people from the softness of our origins, the statement read, when in fact the softness of our origins was the most honest thing we had. The Thalveen, whose near self-destruction 400 cycles ago had been the civilization's most protected historical fact, released a 6-volume historical study. The title was simply what we almost did. The Kelpari territorial dispute, which had been ongoing for 40 cycles, was settled 14 months after first contact via a negotiated agreement that both Northern and Southern representatives said, independently and without comparing notes, had been made possible by the fact that they had attended the first contact proceedings together. Something about witnessing a civilization introduce itself by admitting uncertainty had made the admission of their own more possible. Gaval, who had returned to Thalveen space after 2 months on Earth, sent Sen a short message. You were right about complicated being better than certain. I have been arguing this point with myself for 2 months. I have decided you are correct, and I am going to have to get comfortable with that. Sen sent back. It gets easier. He sent back. Does it? She considered. No, she sent. But it gets more interesting. On Earth, Dr. Chen was appointed to the Joint Cooperative Earth Liaison Institute, where she spent the next decade building the framework for what would eventually become the most translated body of human philosophy in cooperative history, not a formal text but a collected record of the things the Patience Project team had said to each other in the years of waiting, informal conversations and disagreements and private doubts that she had quietly kept. She titled the collection, Letters to No One in Particular. The dedication read, For everyone who kept the transmitter running. Sen read it 3 years later, on a long transit across the outer fringe, back in the cartographer's chair where she had first heard the song. She read it slowly, stopping often. She found, in the margins of a section midway through, that she was writing small notes in Vorath, responses, questions, agreements, 1 or 2 disagreements that she was genuinely passionate about, and that she knew, with the specific delight of intellectual sparring across impossible distances, Dr. Chen would also be passionate about if they ever discussed them. Outside the Ashkaval's window, the stars held their familiar positions. Billions of systems. The routes she had mapped over 20 years of cartography, and the routes she hadn't mapped yet. The veiled system was behind her now, far back, catalogued and named at last. Not the veiled system anymore. That name had been formally retired. Earth's own name for their solar system had been adopted by the cooperative, translated into each member language. The Vorath version was a single syllable that approximated the sound, soul.
Clean. Old.
Human. The star was ordinary by stellar classification standards. What it had managed to grow, left alone, in the cold and the dark and the silence of 400 unobserved cycles, was not. 3 years and 4 months after the Ashkaval first intercepted the call, 7 transmission, the cooperative sent its own signal back. Not on call, 7. That frequency was retired now, declared complete in its purpose, sealed with ceremony by unanimous vote. The signal went out on a new frequency, designated specifically for this purpose, named Resonance Band Sen, won over her strenuous and genuine objections that the naming was unnecessary and embarrassing. The naming committee's response, it is both. We're doing it anyway. The signal was not composed by a committee, which everyone had expected, and which would have produced something polished and official and forgettable. It was composed by the same method by which the best things in the cooperative's history had been produced. Someone with access, impulse, and the specific courage that comes from being tired of waiting for permission. Sen had written it. Not alone. Kyolm had helped, and Dr. Chen had contributed a section, and an elderly Suvan light artist named Veal had provided the harmonic structure that translated her words into something that could travel across space without losing its emotional weight. But Sen had written the core of it, in the cartographer's bay of the Ashkaval, at the same station where she had first heard the question. She had not tried to answer the question formally. She had not composed a report or a greeting or a proof of the cooperative's worthiness as a partner. She had written, as honestly as she could, what the galaxy had felt when it heard Earth's song. The closest translation, imperfect as all translations are, ran like this. We have been here a long time, longer than we can easily speak of. We have built many things. Some of them we are proud of. Some of them we kept in procedural annexes where no one would look because we were not proud of them and because pride felt required. We heard you ask if you had done it right. We had forgotten that was a thing you could ask. You cannot know, and we could not have told you before this, what it did to 37 civilizations to hear that question come in on a clear signal, no interference, no ambiguity. Not a demand, not a proof, just a question, dressed up in harmonics, sent out into a dark it had no guarantee of crossing. We do not have a clean answer. We are not sure clean answers exist for questions that size. But we have this. You made it. You built it. You nearly didn't more than once and you made it anyway. You put the question in the signal instead of hiding it, and the signal traveled, and we were listening. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Caro, come, let us begin. We have so much to tell you, and we have been waiting such a long time to be able to say it. We are not perfect either, but we are honest, and we kept going anyway. And here we are. The signal took 11 months to cross the distance to Seoul. When it arrived, Dr. Chin was in her office at the Liaison Institute, working late on a translation problem that had been troubling her for weeks. Her receiver picked up the incoming transmission and flagged it. She put on her headphones. She listened. She sat for a long time without moving. Then she called Marcus, the engineer who had kept the transmitter running, who was now living in another city and teaching systems engineering to university students, and had one photograph on his office wall that had been there since day one of the Patience project. A photograph of the transmitter under construction, all bare metal and scaffolding, not yet the thing it would become. She called him, and when he answered she said, "Turn on your receiver. Call 7 frequency. The new one. Sen 1. He was quiet while he pulled it up. She waited. After a minute, she heard him stop moving. After 2 minutes, she heard him exhale. After 3 minutes, he said, and she could hear in his voice the specific texture of someone who has just been handed back something they had been carrying for a very long time. They got it.
They got it, she said.
Outside her window, the city was lit up in the dark, the way cities always are, each light a fire that someone had decided to make. Billions of small decisions. Billions of ordinary moments that had, accumulating over thousands of years of stumbling forward, become something that crossed the distance. She thought about the 14 billion kilometers between the city and the transmitter station. She thought about the 100-odd light-years between the transmitter and the Ashkavel the night Sen heard the question. She thought about the signal traveling right now, in all directions, the cooperative's answer spreading outward from Seoul at the speed of light, hitting every dark corner of the mapped galaxy simultaneously, carrying its strange and honest freight. We are not perfect either, but we are honest. And we kept going anyway. She turned off her office light. She went home through the lit city. Above her, the stars held their positions, each one a sun, many of them with planets, several of those planets occupied now by beings who had heard a song from a blue-green world and recognized something in it that they had buried in themselves. The universe, it turned out, was not waiting for a perfect civilization to announce itself. It was waiting for an honest one. It had been waiting, in its patient and enormous way, for something to come through that dark with a question instead of a proof, with a song instead of a declaration, and say, "Here we are. We're not sure we did it right, but we're still here. And we'd really like to know if you are too."
Yendi,